Awesome. All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the May 5th meeting of the Delaware County Solid Waste Advisory Committee. We are co-meeting along with the Sustainability Commission subcommittees focused on zero waste. And we're going to get started with our agenda. So if you are just joining us, go ahead and put your name and affiliation in the chat. And if you could indicate if you're on the advisory committee or one of the subcommittees, then we'll kind of keep track that way. So welcome, everybody. And is there anybody on the line right now who's new from last time? We met last time on April 7th, and we did not necessarily have a full contingent of all of our committee members. So if you wanted to raise your hand and introduce yourself if you're new to this meeting, that would be great. Anybody new? And if you're a member of the public, welcome. And if you're not affiliated with one of the advisory committees, we are happy that you're here. Please go ahead and introduce yourself by putting your name in the chat. Okay, so we'll get started with the agenda. Did everybody get a chance to see the agenda? I can share it on my screen, I believe. I believe this is it. Yep. So just to go over it really briefly, we're going to recap workshop 1. Amy's going to kind of do a little overview and next steps for that, where Alex is going to give us a system overview of kind of our current status of waste, recycling, composting, what's going on big picture wise in the county. Then we're going to launch into discussion of the zero waste initiatives. And I gave you a lot of stuff on email, and you probably haven't all had a chance to look at it, but I want to go over it with you and show you what's there. This is task 4 of our project, which is to identify waste management strategies for reducing trash. And then we're going to talk a little bit about our plans for workshop 2. It's coming up on May 26th at the Norwood Public Library. And then this number 6 is just some attachments where we've summarized the listening sessions, current programs, current system overview, and then the advisory committee draft minutes. So we won't have a big discussion about that, but I'll just kind of make note of that. So why don't I stop sharing and turn it over to Amy, who's going to recap goals and guiding principles from our first workshop.
Great. Thanks, Ruth. And hi, everybody. I hope it's sunny where you are. I'm up here in Massachusetts, and we just got a rare day of sun today. I think everybody saw we based on the conversation from the last advisory committee, I went through the notes and I put together kind of a laundry list of potential guiding principles, and I turned that into a survey. And I gather from talking to Ruth and seeing the notes of your meeting that people weren't necessarily happy with the laundry list, and I get that. But it was meant to be a laundry list and just sort of see the reaction that people had to the different ideas, and some of them were worded, were similar ideas worded a little bit differently. And I think attached to the meeting agenda for today, Ruth had a link to the guiding principles results, but I can also share my screen and show you that let me do that right now. So at our last meeting, protect public health came up as like, this is number 1, and the public felt that way too. We got 37 responses, and the next highest vote getter was make producers responsible, educate everyone. We build the power of community was kind of low. Avoid wasteful products, interestingly, was low. So we got a range of stuff. And I know at your meeting, there was some thought about like, well, could we categorize these? And there were some recommendations for that. And we can do that. And I think the question now, though, is, do we want to really push this survey out more to the public? Or do we want to say, okay, this gives us a glimpse, let's put this into the different categories that were discussed at the Zoom meeting, that Zoom workshop that you had last week. And then we can sort of just, instead of having people vote, we can just sort of do a survey just to the public saying, what's your reaction? So, what do you think of these? Is there anything we're missing? Is there anything that's not important to you? So, anyway, we can just use this information to refine that more and get that back out, maybe in a different format. So that's one thing to discuss. Maybe I'll just stop and see if we want to discuss that now.
Did you want to show the categories from, I think it was Shari and Jennifer had been doing some synthesizing of these?
Yeah, I don't have that kind of teed up to share. So maybe
Okay,
if you do, I can stop sharing. You can do that.
sure.
Uh, but I know, yeah, if you have it handy, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, so just as an understanding of what we did, so there were two things going on at the workshop. We had our in-person workshop with Alex and Amy facilitated at the Upper Darby Library, and it was very attended by some really powerhouse folks. So thank you all for your participation in that. And then we had most of our other committee members and some members of the public on a Zoom call, and those happened simultaneously at the same time. We had the same agenda, different conversations, and then we've kind of summarized in the meeting summary kind of the upshot. And
Okay.
so Amy shared the overview, which was what came in through the survey. And then in our meeting, there was some discussion about, wow, a lot of these are duplicative. I really want to vote for more than 8. And
Mhm.
so Shari and Jennifer came up with some categories, right? So protecting the environment, protecting public health, strengthening zero waste jobs and economy, making producers responsible for wasting products and packaging, educating the public and creating a zero waste culture, centering equity and inclusion, and creating economies of scale, helping municipalities become less wasteful cost effectively, and creating new jobs. So, and then I think Jennifer kind of teed off of Shari's initial draft from the workshop and from the input, and kind of consolidated them a little bit more, and maybe even put them in an order of prioritization, but just kind of look at that. So centering equity and inclusion, protect public health and the environment, reducing waste, fostering zero waste culture through education and outreach, strengthening zero waste jobs and local economy, and improving transparency and communication between the Solid Waste Authority and the public, and then supporting municipalities and keeping costs low and providing more consolidated county level zero waste resources and services. Not on this list are the kind of 4 major lenses of the sustainability plan, which have an equity lens and also a governance lens, but there's some sort of overlap there. And in the plan, we can kind of say, a lot of our direction comes from the point of view of sustainability, and then these would be some of our specific things that we would want to include. So I just wanted to share that, Amy, and then maybe
Yeah,
kind of go back to you for a discussion.
sure. Thanks, Ruth. And I should have actually started off talking about how the public workshop went, and so maybe I'll just back up a little bit and do that. And so, as Ruth said, Alex and I were in Upper Darby last week at the library. They're hosting the first of the 3 public workshops, sort of that are sort of pre-planning workshops. Or during the planning. The final workshop will be when the draft plan is done, and this was to give people an overview of zero waste, to talk about inform them about the planning process, and to get a discussion about the guiding principles. And Jim McLaughlin was there. I don't think he's on the call today. And Bonnie, I'm forgetting Bonnie's last name. She was,
Yeah.
yeah, thank you. She was there. And then we had about 8 to 10 people. So there was a reporter that came. There was somebody from the state rep's office and somebody from the local city council in Upper Darby. And everybody who was there was really engaged in the conversation, had a lot to add. There was some distrust of whether we were truly committed to zero waste, or is somebody going to say, it's too expensive, we're just going to keep disposing of everything. And I think Alex and I did a good job of convincing people that we were personally and professionally committed to zero waste, and that zero waste does make economic sense. It should make economic sense. So I'd say it was a good meeting. It would have been nice if it were a little better attended, but I know Melissa did an incredible job of outreach. But it's something to think about for the upcoming ones too, is how can we get the word out more? And, you know, is COVID something keeping people away? It's, you know, it's great that we have the Zoom thing going on concurrently also, so we give people options. But Alex, do you have anything you want to add about the meeting?
No, I think you're right. It was really valuable to be together in a room and talking about it, and a few more people would have been great. But there were enough people that we had some really great discussions. So I appreciate everyone that was able to show up and help promote it.
Yeah, Melissa, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, so how many people did attend, and were they all from Upper Darby, or what was the distribution of municipalities?
I think they were all from Upper Darby. I think it was like seven, I don't know, it was 8 to 10. I don't have the list in front of me. And some people filled out the survey online, and then we had hard copies, and I entered those in. And my recollection was that I entered 5 or 6 surveys, and everybody was from Upper Darby.
There was a state rep there as well, or from
Yeah.
the state rep's office.
Right. And she lives in Upper Darby.
Who was that?
I'm trying to pull it up right now. I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
And Bonnie, feel free to pipe up. You knew everybody there, I think.
Her name is Jill Carey, and she works with Gina Curry.
Thank you.
Yeah. And, you know, one of the things she brought up was that she's a single mom, and, you know, people have a lot on their minds. And so, you know, education is really important, and we need to make programs simple for people.
So did you want to go ahead and get some feedback then on the approach and the next steps, Amy? It looked like Bonnie also wanted to weigh in there.
Okay.
Bonnie, go ahead.
Yeah, I just saw that there were 35 people in the Zoom session. I think that that's pretty awesome that you got that many people. I don't know whether they were from all around the county or what, but you know, that's like more than 40 people, which I think actually for the very first time that you're doing that, that's actually a pretty good turnout. So good work.
Great. Thank you. So I think the question now is, you know, I'm sorry, Joan, yeah, your hand's up.
Maybe I'm going to respond to the question you haven't asked yet, but for a number of reasons, I think the survey to send out would not be helpful. It's as it is, it's too long. There are too many. I mean, I saw one where one question had like 30%, and the same kind of question asked differently had 7%. So that's confusing. And if that's not going to be clear, people don't have time for that, and it's not really going to gain much. If you were going to send out, I think, the two capsulizations, that might be an interesting thing to send out. And just like not send them out separately, but send them out as if they're together, removing Sari and Jennifer's name, just asking, you know, how do you think about this? And that might be the way to find out. I think they're much better organized than the long list.
Well, let's focus on Jennifer's for a minute, because I think Jennifer's riffed off of Shari's. And so I think maybe the question would be anything be missing from the point of view of the advisory committee or the sustainability commission that we would want to make sure got on the list as far as a guiding principle of the plan? And maybe, Amy, if you could just recap what we would consider to be a guiding principle, just because in our discussion, we did start a lot of discussion around strategies and tactics, which are not this. So you want to just say what a guiding principle is?
Yeah, so the guiding principles are the values that the plan is developed through. So if, for example, equity and inclusion is up there on top, then that would be the value, the strategies that are developed, the programs, policies, and infrastructure that are developed would be done through a lens of equity and inclusion. So it might be about, you know, who gets hired and what, you know, what they're paid, where facilities are sited. So that would be the value that would guide it. And same for the other things. So these would all really be, these are the values of our plan. These are the values through which we developed the initiatives that we're going to be implementing over the 10-year course of the plan. Does that make sense? And I'll just say too, one of the discussions at our meeting was, are the guiding principles, do they guide the planning process, or do they guide the development of the plan? And it's really both. These would primarily be, though, what are the kinds of initiatives that we put in our plan that fit these values that we have agreed upon as a county.
So there was one item here which I thought was a little bit on the nose for communicating outward, which is this number 6, improve transparency and communication between the Solid Waste Authority and the public. That's a little bit on the nose for me in that I know there's a little bit of a history there. There has been lack of transparency in the past. I think that maybe that would be a little bit too explicit for a guiding principle, and that maybe it's really about improved transparency and commission between, all of the government agencies, the municipalities, the county, the authority, and the public. But that would be just my 2 cents on that particular one. But why don't we go ahead and open up the floor and get a discussion? And Amy, if you could facilitate, since I'm sharing,
Yeah.
I can't see people who are raising their hands.
Yep, and I'm looking for hands raised, and I've got to keep scrolling through. So feel free to just speak out also. And this is something we can do. If you feel like the ones from Jennifer are on target, we can do a little wordsmithing and come back to you. So, for the one that Ruth brought up, maybe improve transparency and communication, just period. That's the end of the sentence.
Well,
So-
I'll say I was one of the ones who in previous meetings felt that long list was not a very good way of trying to figure out how to make the plan. It was just kind of a long list. So this narrowed down looks much better and tighter to me. And I think it's a pretty solid list. I'm not sure what would be missing, but I think
Yeah,
it's I think
Do you
very
think
close to the
anything's
right
missing,
track.
Scott, from your perspective?
Do I think anything's missing? No, I can't think what would be missing. I think your suggestion on number 6 is reasonable, and I think the haulers should also be included in that list of people who have open communication.
Okay, so let's write this down.
And
Okay.
Alex is taking notes too. Melissa, I saw you had your hands up.
I did. And then I took it down because I wanted to think a little bit more, but I had an initial question, which is, are you asking us whether these 7 principles reflect, should be more or less adopted and reflect this effort? Or are you asking us to prioritize which of these? I assume the former, right?
Not to prioritize. I think
Okay.
what we're looking for the committee to give guidance on is what should be the next step. We think in our discussion at the Zoom meeting, we said, we got some responses, but obviously it wasn't countywide. And so it would be nice to keep that communication going with the public. And so one next step would be to kind of codify this revised list, add in anything that we think is missing, put that out to the public, and get some more feedback on the list, saying, here are the preliminary goals and the guiding principles for our planning process. Is there anything missing? Do you agree or disagree? And just ask for feedback and just put that out again in our outreach. Prioritizing, we were not intending to do. So so we weren't intending to do prioritizing. This discussion is really about next steps and what's missing.
Right. And I'll just say too that different guiding principles are going to be relevant to different initiatives. And so that's why, it might not make sense to prioritize them here, but maybe, by initiative, maybe that's something we would reflect back on. Jim Warner?
Okay, thank you. I was just able to log on and my timing was impeccable because you were talking about number 6. So I just wanted to know if there were specific suggestions or recommendations that I may have missed in transparency and communication from us, the Waste Authority, to the public.
This came from our discussion on the Zoom meeting, actually, I think you attended, and it was really about we needed that accountability and transparency specific. But I don't recall there being in our discussion any specific issues, but I know that there have been history with the folks don't understand what's going on in the county about where our trash goes, how it's managed. I think that was just basically the issue. And so that improved transparency, communication, accountability. We just had the discussion just now about maybe that should be, kind of countywide, and it should include the municipalities, the county, the authority, and the haulers.
Yeah,
We can
okay.
all have more transparency, communication, and
Right.
accountability.
Yeah, I think it's fair to note that in the last several months, our transparency and our effort to communicate has increased tremendously, and it will keep increasing. We now have a website. All of our entire board packets are put on the website from our meeting. There's an upcoming board meeting this Wednesday at 3 p.m. And we do need to hire eventually an outreach coordinator, community type person. And that's not in the next few months, but it has to be in our longer time horizon. We get that. So we will be continuing to improve in this area.
Great. Joy, your hand is up.
Yes, I have a comment and also a suggestion. So first, Ruth, I really enjoyed your talk at the sustainability conference. And one of the things that I took away from that was the 4 places that you highlighted that have gone to zero waste, and there might be more. They all had specific things like either deaths because of landfill or a possibility of an incinerator coming into their community in order to get action from the community at large. And I think around here, at least the people to know where our waste goes, a lot of the coalescence is around environmental justice and reducing the impact of the incinerator. And I know that's not necessarily a guiding principle, but if something could be a little bit more specific, especially since that is one of our main, coalescing drives for this. I feel like it should be somehow more, I know it's, it's not necessarily, it's more of an action than a guiding principle. I just think it should be a little bit more reflected here.
So I appreciate that. And so these first couple of bullets or numbered items are kind of getting at that environmental justice issue, but they're a little oblique, right? So it's kind of and some of it in our discussion, we said, hey, we love environmental justice, but what's the difference? We all like no incineration, but you can't vote for both if you're only selecting 8. So if we wanted to wordsmith something a little bit more on the nose with regards to the county would like to transition to a more sustainable system for solid waste management or municipal waste management and reduce impacts of communities and environmental justice communities, those kind of would be an overarching goal, which was, quite frankly, in the request for proposals that Amy and Alex and I responded to. And so that could be articulated really upfront in the plan if we all continue to agree with it. And I don't know, Alex, maybe you or I could look up that language and add that here, but we can just summarize that from the RFP as kind of being, that's really why we're doing this plan this way. The traditional municipal waste management plan really does not have to go into all this. We really just have to document what's going on and the current programs and, ensuring that you have disposal capacity. The county wanted to go above and beyond based on a lot of input from a lot of you all. And so that's kind of that overarching thing. So I think we could add that in as an overarching goal. And then these could be.
And these are the way you achieve that goal. Because it's not, to my mind, if we're shutting down the incinerator in an environmental justice community and then just putting the waste, taking it to another environmental justice community, that isn't solving anything except in our own backyards. And so I think a guiding principle that talks about environmental justice broadly, aside from just shutting down the Chester incinerator, would, to me, make sense. But I mean, this is your all plan. So, and Melissa?
Yeah, I was kind of obsessing on the accountability word. And I view, in part because, I'm spending a lot of time obsessing about illegal dumping and how we are trying to tackle that. And within the context of zero waste, I'm really trying to figure out how we might be able to divert some of what we're addressing in these dump sites so that they don't end up in landfills or the incinerator. So the accountability notion and the concept of a zero waste culture, I think, speak to a broader mindset. I think accountability applies not just to the Solid Waste Authority. I think all of us in the county will have smaller or larger obligations for accountability in the context of this zero waste culture. I don't think it's just the Solid Waste Authority. And to me, that is evident
It can't be
in
just
the sustainability, in all the sustainability planning that I've seen so far. But certainly I feel it. I feel an obligation, an accountability obligation.
I completely agree. And it can't just be the authority that takes on the role of solving all these problems, and all these challenges and desires and things. So yes, we're going to have to figure out a multi-tiered set of responsibilities, accountabilities, throughout the system if this is going to work. And that, to me, is one of the greatest challenges we have, is to introduce that mindset that we are all at all different levels, down from governmental leadership all the way down through the individual organizations down to the home level, have a different role to play in achieving these goals. And if we don't introduce these ideas and strengthen the mindset in them, we just won't be successful, because it's a chain, right? If you break a link of the chain, it becomes extremely difficult to try to work around that broken link. So if the municipalities are not on board, this is not going to work. If the home owners are not doing what they can, this will not work. If the government leadership at other levels is not working, it will not work. So at every level, we're going to have to figure out where that accountability lies and support success.
Yeah, it would help me if I could go back to my office and say, this is what's required. I'm asking for it, actually.
Right.
Right.
That's exactly what I'm working on as well, and trying to understand the authority's role is taking the list of things that you all have put forward. I love the big matrix. I don't have a picture of it here. That big the table that you all put together that lists all of the various initiatives, and then says, okay, what level of the organization, from senior leadership at the state level all the way down to the homeowner, who would be responsible for supporting efforts, and what is their role in achieving those initiatives at different stages. And because we're going to have to get it down to that level of granularity in order to understand what are the specific things that people can do to help us achieve these initiatives, because it will take effort, maybe not uniformly across all levels of the organization, but certainly across the organization. There will be roles to be, or there will be either be roles to be played in each of the initiatives that we need to make clear, and support folks in understanding those roles.
Great, thanks. Just one thought. I'm looking at the comments in the chat at the same time, and then Joan and Becca, I'll call on you. The issue of no incineration, I'm wondering, one of the things that we've used in other plans is, as a guiding principle, is accepting the international peer-reviewed definition of zero waste, that will guide it. And that definition excludes incineration. And so I'm wondering if, if that would make sense as a guiding principle, or that's just sort of an overarching guiding principle of the plan as a whole.
Well, Amy, I think this guiding thing that I added from the RFP, guide the county's transition to sustainable methods of materials management using zero waste practices and following the zero waste hierarchy. I think, if appropriate and based on the committee recommendation, of course, we would want to include that definition of zero waste in the plan. So, but I'm not sure it necessarily needs to be a guiding principle, but, I would refer to others, but maybe we could take a couple of more comments.
Yeah. So Joan and Becca, and then Bonnie.
Okay, you said excludes incineration. Did you mean includes incineration? Oh, excludes. Oh, never mind. I got that. No,
Okay.
my question. Sorry about that. My observation about what is missing, the only thing that, this came up for me when I heard accountability, and I'm thinking about my own community, the way products are packaged. What place does that have in this? If you think about it, that is huge for folks who don't have a lot of choice about where they buy their stuff. That goes to my community. And I can tell you on a trash day how much is out there because of the stuff that people buy that is packaged so badly. So is there any way that we can put, I noticed in Saris, there was something about that. What would be a guiding principle that would help us with this?
So this making producers responsible for wasteful products and packaging. So that did not, for whatever reason, end up in Jennifer's list. However, in our discussion at the on the Zoom call, we did talk about the fact that, wow, how does Delaware County have a role in that? And we do have a discussion of that within the initiative. So we'll get to that discussion in a little bit. So what is it that the county and the municipalities can do about making manufacturers accountable? And they can do, advocacy and support at the state level for sure. And there may be things like bans of certain problem products and other things that people can do at the municipal or county level. So I'm thinking that may be more of a strategy rather than a guiding principle. But, that's kind of where we ended up in our discussion at the Zoom call, was that, is that really a guiding principle of the plan? Is that something that the county can do? And is any of that embedded in any of these already? And what is it that we can do in our plan? So folks,
thanks. I also wondered if center equity inclusion would include the environmental justice issue.
Well, I feel like it should. I don't want to speak for Jennifer or Shari, but I feel like it should, right?
Yeah,
I think so.
So
yeah, I mean, it really should. I don't see why it wouldn't. I mean, that's really what equity inclusion is. I know, just again, coming from outside perspective, if people read that, that would be my impression.
So let's just take Becca, Bonnie, and Jacqueline, and then everybody else. I think we're going to save the chat. If you have more thoughts, put it in the chat, and then we'll move on to the other topic. So Becca?
Sure. So I just wanted to comment on Melissa, Joan, and kind of Jim's comments. I know that you were looking for the next logical path or things that should be included in the second session. And I think a lot of the discussion to get more meaningful, I guess, input is I do think we need to kind of inform people back to what the sustainability plan had talked about of what can the Delaware County Solid Waste Authority control, what can they influence, and then what can they educate people on? Because I think that we all hope that this plan can answer all the questions and make a complete zero waste community, but it's not really going to be effective unless people really recognize which groups can control what. So I think that would help with Jim's comment on having a tiered or a hierarchy of this is what the Solid Waste Authority can control versus what needs to be passed or done by other players in the game. So I would just recommend that be part of the next presentation of really educating people on what the Delaware County Solid Waste Authority can control versus what they can influence versus what they can educate people on.
Well, and some of that is in flux, right? So there's what the authority has currently been assigned, right, in terms of their work scope. And there's what the municipalities and the county can assign to the authority in the future. So I think that issue of circle of control and circle of influence is how we like to talk about it a lot. There are certain things that the municipalities are taking responsibility for that they may want. We had a discussion of this at our meeting. They may want more help. They want to band together in groups and, you know, do cooperative agreements. They may look for help from the county or the authority in providing some of that guidance and support, joint procurements, more, processing capacity. There may be other things that eventually get assigned to the authority. So I think that those things are in flux and will be a discussion of our next steps. So when we go to talk about the zero waste initiatives and we talk about the long range plan, we want to be mindful that we don't have institutionally within the county right now the ability to do everything we potentially want to do. That institutional development would need to be developed at the county level, at this municipal level, at the authority level, where appropriate. But I don't think we're quite ready to have that discussion of who does what yet. We have to figure out what is or whatever. But Amy, let's go ahead and take a couple more comments, please.
Yep,
I don't want to
so
stifle the conversation, but
Yep, Bonnie and Jacqueline, and then we'll move on and keep using the chat.
Sorry. So a couple things. One, I think that with the definition, with the zero waste and using the global definition, I think that a lot of things would actually be cleared up if there were a glossary and that all the words that we use are defined prior to this. Even this issue of whether where to put environmental justice. And when you say equity, what do you mean by equity? And that could include environmental justice. So if people have the definitions that you're using, then we're all operating under the same ideas rather than what this person thinks equity means or what this person thinks zero waste means or whatever. So having a glossary of terms ahead of all of this would be helpful. And then the second thing I wanted to point out was that in this improved transparency, communication, and accountability, there's the word between the Solid Waste Authority and the public. And the public also has responsibility for transparency, communication, and accountability. And maybe there can be, I know in Philly, they have this thing in their green futures plan, or Green Works, I think it's called, in which they actually list all of the responsibilities that the city needs to be responsible for, and what communities can do, what individuals can do, what local governments can do, what businesses can do, so that it's stated very clearly that everyone has a responsibility towards this. And here is what your role is in this and what you can do. So I think that we really need to include the public and making sure that they are aware that they have a responsibility in this as well.
great.
Thank you. And then Jacqueline, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, thanks. I think, obviously there's lots of work that needs to be done, and having producer responsibility, educating the public, absolutely. I just want to express my concern that I don't want to dilute the work that happens by the county, including all these different things that absolutely are critical. But if we can just make sure that the county is managing its waste, having a zero waste plan, getting rid of incineration, and really getting the municipalities and everyone that has to discard trash in the county in a responsible way, I think that has to be our primary objective, with those guiding principles of equity inclusion, which of course hopefully will guide us to that step. Absolutely, we need to be doing these other things, but I just get concerned about having a laundry list that things get diluted. because there's only so much time and resources. So no need for any response or anything like that. I just wanted to express that concern.
That's a great point. So Amy, maybe what we could do in terms of next steps would be, we'll go ahead and based on this comment, and we'll review the notes and just put any other comments that you want in the chat. And we will wordsmith a version of Shari and Jennifer's consolidation of our guiding principles ideas into something that then could be put into another feedback mechanism. We'll put that on our website. We'll say that these are some preliminary guiding principles that the advisory committee has come up with, and that we'll be working on these over the next few months and hopefully have another discussion about them, but something along these lines are what's going to appear in our plan. So if you, public, municipalities, county folks, everybody would take a look at these guiding principles, see what's missing, and make suggestions about what else should be included, that might be good. And I think maybe for each of those guiding principles, we'll have a couple of sentences about what we think that means based on this discussion. So center, equity and inclusion, what does that mean to us? Put in some guiding words there that folks understand what that means. Put that out to everybody, you guys, the public, and then we'll look to finalize those a little bit down the road. Is that an okay strategy? Anybody object to that strategy? All right. All right. Well, this was a very robust discussion, and I so much appreciate the discussion, because of course these guiding principles need to reflect the goals and values of the county, of the municipalities, and of you all as the folks that are advising this process. So let's go ahead and move on. Alex, did you want to give us your presentation of our system overview? This would be a version of what we would want to make sure that we have an understanding for everyone in terms of transparency, how everything works together in the county and who does what. We will get to that idea of who's responsible for what once we know what is, and then go from there. But go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, thanks, Ruth. So I'll just go quickly through it, but feel free to ask some questions or jump in if anything doesn't make sense. To start with, we were able to get a lot of background information and come up with the county diversion rate. You can see we're about 42% diversion between recycling and yard waste, food waste. Now, this overall average is pretty heavily skewed by commercial businesses, which have closer to a 50% diversion rate. So if you're thinking about just residential households, probably it's more around 26% from our calculations that the households are actually diverting. The commercial just has a lot of metals. About half their diversion rate is from metals. So it really skews the overall county numbers, but it's a real diversion rate because that stuff's getting recycled. It feeds into our next piece on the strategies to look at ways that we can increase the capacity for recycling and composting, the access, and reduce the cost to municipalities so that we can drive additional diversion in these areas. Yeah. Now, Jim Warner has a really great slide about this, but I'll just kind of go quickly how the waste flows. Now, the Delaware County Solid Waste Authority plays one really important part, but the municipalities have to get all of the trash to the Solid Waste Authority. So the Solid Waste Authorities run 2 transfer stations that have a lot of opportunity, really important assets in Delaware County. They take that material and transfer it to Covana in Chester for long-term disposal. The municipalities are for destructive disposal. They recently entered into a 3-year contract, and we probably won't get into the details of that today, but we're working on the longer term disposal plan. But yeah, the municipalities collect the waste from the households, deliver it to one of the 2 transfer stations or directly to Covana. And then most municipalities also have additional services around recycling and yard waste, and commercial institutional generators hire private haulers, and a few are served by the communities. This next slide shows how the municipalities are serving the residents. And it's, the main point is that each of the 49 municipalities is on their own to figure it out at this point. The majority of municipalities do provide curbside services to residents. About 25% of them are through municipal fleets where they own the trucks and have their own employees. About a third of them I'm sorry, a third of them are municipal fleets. About half of them contract with an independent hauler to provide that service to the residents. And then the remaining handful of municipalities require their residents to contract directly with a private hauler in what we would call a subscription service. So, every municipality basically is providing trash collection. The vast majority, about 86% of them, are providing recycling collection. And then about half of them are doing yard waste, and a little bit more doing leaf waste collection seasonally. An interesting fact about Delaware County is about almost half the municipalities have twice a week collection, at least seasonally. Some of them are only twice a week in the summer. And then the final slide I wanted to share is just, we're looking into the economics so that we can really understand the impact that this will have financially to the municipalities, what each of these strategies, how that would change the economics. So we reviewed the 22 budgets for the municipalities. We were able to get that information from about 30 of the municipalities. We were able to get their overall budgets. And then we also looked at the municipalities that had fees to the residents, and they match really closely. So I think that's reassuring on the numbers. But basically, municipalities are spending about $270 a year on waste, recycling, yard waste, in any other bulky waste or collection services they have. It comes out to about $22.50 per household per year. And that number varies greatly within the averages. So one municipality with really similar services to another municipality right next door, in some cases, are paying significantly more to the same vendor for the same services. And that's based on the number of households they have, potentially when they sign the contracts. Costs are going up for transportation, but on the recycling end of things, values are going up for materials, so costs are going down for recycling. So there's a lot of variability on it, but this kind of shows the average and gives us a good sense of what the impact of it, implementing different programs will be at the municipal or eventually resident cost.
It looks like you have a question there from Jim. Got a question or a
No, I
comment?
don't have a question. I just wanted to point out that the average household disposes about 1 ton of waste per year. So the disposal fee is about $78 for residential waste. So you can see the relationship of the disposal fee to the total cost of the homeowner is less than 1/3. And
That's
a
right.
lot of people directly relate the tipping fee to the cost of the household, but it's really the collection and the cost of that collection that is the main driver of increases in the annual fee to the household, not so much the tipping fee for the garbage itself.
Yeah, that's right. I was looking at what would the impact of $10 more per household per year be, and that's a 15% increase on the tip fee, and it results in less than a 5% increase in the overall cost. So it's a really good
And
point.
if I could throw in just real quick there, it's really important that this organization appreciate that a substantial amount of what we're trying to do, of any new initiative, is going to be the logistics, the local transportation and logistics of doing these things. If we're going to add another stream like composting or something like that, we need to think very carefully about how that logistics of that are going to be incorporated, because we can't afford dedicated trucks often to go around and do these things. It's becomes unaffordable. We need to integrate these things together. And I'm very supportive of that, and they have been done. So we just need to be mindful that the logistics of these services is by far, as Jim indicates, the greater portion of the cost here, not the actual processing. So
Yeah. And Joy just put a comment in the thing that I think really is true. It's like for the households that have twice a week collection, that impact of going to once a week trash collection is going to have a far greater economic impact than the tip fees.
right. And I think that was the story that the lady from media had at the conference. It was so good. They integrated their compost collection together or merged it and overlaid what they were already doing with the additional collection. So we're going to have to think about ways of supporting our municipalities in understanding creative ways to do these things that don't add a significant logistics burden onto them. It is absolutely essential. And I look forward to understanding what other communities have done. This is the great value of Zero Waste Associates, is that you all bring that perspective across many different communities and how they've done the most cost-effective logistical solutions related to these.
Alex, Danielle has a question in the chat about whether any of the recycling tons that we were projecting go to Covanta as burned. And I think that the answer is no, these are the tons that we know that are reported of going to recycling. However, we know that there are sometimes things happen and hauler will take a load of recycling to the wrong place, but by and large, this is not the case countywide in all the municipalities. Did you want to elaborate on that at all?
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. If the recycling is delivered to the MRF, there's obviously a residual rate at the MRF, and if people put non-recyclable items in their recycling, that's going to end up in disposal. The MRF can't magically make non-recyclable items recycled, but the material that's recyclable that gets delivered to the MRF is getting recycled. Markets are good. There's certainly opportunities that I think we'll talk about in our next area that the county could help ensure materials used for its highest and best use. But at this point, recyclable material isn't being sent to incineration. And I don't know if Dominic is here from Republic Services, if he has anything to add to that.
Whoops.
Yeah, I am here. Thanks, Alex. Yeah, that would be avoided at all costs, other than the 15 to 20% contamination rate that you would see.
Great. All right, good. And there's another question, I think, from Melissa about some revenue generating measures. And it's a little early for us to get in those details about other ways of generating revenue aside from tipping fees at the authority facilities. But that's definitely something that we'll be looking into and researching. Melissa, I'm going to send you, I'll send everybody a link to a great webinar from Institute for Local Self-Reliance that did cover a lot of county level surcharges that are placed on, different mechanisms. We have a whole way of doing different mechanisms, either at the tipping fee or other places to generate revenue for these kinds of programs. So we'll do that as a second step. Any other questions for Alex? All right. Well, thank you, Alex. We'll be refining this and shaping this information into the sections of the plan, which you're going to be seeing over the next few months, but we wanted to give you a peek into what we were looking at. We're doing a lot of data analysis with the help of the authority staff and getting a lot of good information from the EP. So we'll be reflecting that and showing you as we go along. We're going to launch into a discussion of the zero waste initiatives. In the scope of work that the county has, we call these waste management activities. And it was very explicit in the RFP that they follow the zero waste hierarchy. So I'm going to share my slide of the I sent to you in the well, first I'm going to show you, I'm going to give a little history of this, of where we got here. So we have from the US EPA, I don't know if you can see this. Oops. Let me try again. No, stop share for a minute. Let's see. So we have from the US EPA managing and transforming waste streams. And if you took a little bit of a peek at that survey that I had in the agenda, we had that was a resource for us to come up with some strategy and tactics according to the zero waste hierarchy to review for Delaware County. So I'm going to try again to just get to that website. Here we go. So this, and I'll put the link in the chat. We helped the US EPA to pull this together. There are 100 different strategies from around the country and 350 case study as examples of counties and municipalities that are implementing these programs. So there's a policy and program table. It's called Managing and Transforming Waste Streams. It's on the US EPA website. And this kind of forms the basis for research for things that we might want to consider for Delaware County. Okay, so we shared that with the zero waste committee of the Sustainability Commission, because before the advisory committee was formed, we had been having regular meetings with the Sustainability Commission Zero Waste Committee. We had to start somewhere with, we have 100 different examples. And of course, there are thousands of examples of policies, programs, and infrastructure that communities can move forward to implement zero waste. How do we contextualize that? So we came up with a survey, which we made them all take, even though they may not all have wanted to take it, just because it's a little bit chicken and the egg. On the one hand, what strategies and tactics are going to get us farther along the road of where we want to be is a question maybe for us in terms of analysis and potential diversion rates, right? But it's also in the context of what's desired by the community and what's of interest. So if you had a peek at this, and I'll just see if I can share it for a minute. If you had a peek at this survey, which we can talk about next steps for that. But anyway, if you had a chance of looking at this survey or filling it out, this was where we narrowed down from, let's say, 50 initiatives down to the 20 that I shared with you on the chart that we're working on. So that's just to say that was the methodology that we used internally within Delaware County, working with the Sustainability Commission to get going on some level of to start in on what initiatives we should be working on. And of course, we want this to be a completely transparent and public process. And that's where you guys come in. So the next thing that we did is we said, okay, well, let's get going on this, because probably, possibly in Delaware County, folks will want to be looking at least these things. So we came up with this chart, and now I'm going to share my screen and show you the chart, keep it going back and forth here, and showing you the chart of initiatives and what we started to work on. All right, so if you go down the left-hand column, these are the categories of the zero waste hierarchy. And they start out with rethink and redesign, reduce, reuse, recycle, compost, material recovery, and residual management. Residual management, of course, is the focus of the municipal solid waste management plan, because we got to make sure we have the capacity to get rid of our trash over 10 years. So that's kind of the bottom of the hierarchy, but it is a key subject matter of the plan. So that's in there. But we all in Delaware County, we know we want to reduce as much as possible the material that we have to go to destructive disposal. So those are the strategies and tactics that are above here. And we've categorized those in terms of policies, programs, and infrastructure. And then we've populated a folder for you where we've begun to accumulate information. So based on these examples, and of course we can add, subtract, etc. But we wanted to get something going. So we've done some examples of what do we mean by this strategy, and what are some examples locally, regionally, nationwide that we can look to. And then, what kind of evaluation can we do? Is it something that we would prefer rather do in the short term, medium term, long term? And then what will this get us in terms of diversion potential? So we're not quite there as far as diversion potential, but just sort of summarizing and aggregating the information so that we can talk about these items. So the ones on the check that I've checked off, which I think Joan saw me doing earlier this morning. Lead by example, deconstruction, universal recycling and composting model ordinance, construction and demolition breeder requirements, reuse collection, edible food donation, reuse and repair, refillable stations, zero waste packaging stores, Center for Hard to Recycle Materials, and recyclables and organics processing. We already have a draft developed for you to review, refine, ask questions about, etc. And then we have a number of other ones that are in development. So product policies, every other week trash collection, or even just reducing down to once a week trash collection. So there's some opportunity there. Mixed organics processing, materials characterization, and then the 10-year destructive disposal capacity scenarios. So let me just launch into, so we're gonna wanna kind of go over, so what we wanna get out of the discussion today is a process for discussing amongst ourselves, things that additional ideas that we would want you to give us direction on researching. So that's one. And then number two, our plan for presenting these ideas to the public at the next public workshop, and then to get feedback. So there's kind of a, you guys will be involved in kind of the geeky details. Okay, what do we mean by this? How much does it cost? What's the diversion rate? We're going to go through all that eventually, but we do need to get some buy-in, some consideration, some support, some acknowledgement, some transparency and accountability from the public, and elevate some of these issues, particularly the ones that might be sticky, like reducing trash to once a week collection or even every other week collection as a potential future down the road possibility. So, and then, so that's sort of what we want to get out of the conversation today. What additional strategies and tactics should we be thinking about? This is not your only time to tell us this, but we wanted to initiate the discussion here, and then we'll have a longer discussion about our plans for the workshop. I did want to kind of put some emphasis in that 10-year destructural capacity initiative, which, as you can see, is still in process. And to give you a little bit of our status report on that. So we did an initial look at what the alternatives are to incineration early on. And that report that we did, which was, very limited in its scope, we put in our documents that are on our advisory committee drive in the resources folder. So you can look at that. Essentially what that did is it said, hey, looking around the county, looking around the region, there are alternatives to incineration. And, you could transfer it to other landfills. You can use the Fairless landfill, et cetera. You can use our own landfill for trash. The authority is now moved beyond that initial analysis that we did and are developing a financial model. And this financial model will allow us to put in some scenarios for consideration for this plan. So this is something that the authority is taking on for their own use, which is to plan, their system. Their system needs to be influenced by this planning process. So we're doing the outreach, we're doing the discussion, we're working with the advisory committee with, of course, the authority staff, hip to hip, but it'll be a little bit iterative because, of course, we want to understand impacts of different strategies on cost. So that's something that's in development, that's already completed. We can feed in some scenarios to the authority. Authority staff has offered that to us so that we can come up with different alternatives. And there are things that drive those choices. So, for example, the transfer stations, Alex and I were able to have a nice tour by Jim Warner and Jim McLaughlin of the transfer stations. They're in pretty bad shape. So that's a question mark. Currently, we do not have the capacity at those transfer stations to store solid waste overnight in a robust way because we do not have a robust way of covering the trash. If we wanted to store it overnight, that's an issue. It might also be a permitting issue. There is a limitation on the number of drivers available in the region and potentially a limitation on the number of transfer trailers available in the region. That keeps us from transferring immediately all of our trash out of the county to the county-owned landfill or other landfills. So there are some barriers that will be embedded in to be overcome, but sort of the consequences of which can be addressed in this model and in this plan. So we're going to be working hopefully very closely with the authority staff on that model so that the ideas that come out of this planning process can be reflected in it, particularly with regards to the disposal side. We will have the responsibility for coming up with the cost analysis for these diversion alternatives, and some reduction in trash, will reduce costs to the authority. It won't reduce all of their costs because, the transfer stations, the landfill, there's certain operating hours. If you get 1 ton in, if you get 5 tons in or 500 tons in, some of those costs are static and some of them are variable. So those issues we will be addressing. But if we are able to reduce over the 10-year planning period our trash by XYZ, we might be able to reduce our cost by ABC. It's not a direct correlation, but some of those things we'll be talking with authority staff about. I wanted to highlight that for that 10-year destructive disposal capacity initiative because you don't have that in front of you, and it's something that we're going to have to work closely with the authority staff on. So now I'll pause for a minute and see if folks have ideas of things that they would really like to see us evaluate in terms of the up the hierarchy, ideas that you would like us to see that are not reflected in this initial list that we came up with the Zero Waste Committee. So I'll stop sharing for a minute so I can see you. Anybody got their hand up? Anything missing, or is it perfect? All right, while you're mulling that over, Jim McLaughlin kind of took our idea list here. And from his perspective, as you know, someone who is to be accountable for what the authority has to do, what others have to do, has come up with a version of this where he's assigned roles. So just for food for thought, Jim, did you want to go ahead and share your screen on the roles that you thought might make sense? And did you want to explain this a little bit based on our matrix here?
Yeah, I appreciate the chance. This is pretty notional. I mean, at the position that I sit in, I have to start thinking about how one would actually go and implement a lot of these things, and who would we need to engage in order to either draw revenue, resources. You know, where would we get the funding for these things? Is there a policy change that has to occur? And if so, what organization would implement that policy change? And then, again, all the way down. So there are different levels here. I assume you can see the bottom here. I color coded the state, the county, and the municipal roles. I didn't go all the way down to the home level. I just stopped at the municipal level. And the county can include the county government. It can include the authority. No clarity there yet. This is just completely notional. When I looked at this diagram, and first of all, I love the background work behind it. There are, each one of the initiatives is documented, and I think the team is doing an excellent job of doing that. But I started saying, well, where, if I'm going to begin in the position that I'm in as chair of the board, and supporting and guiding my board in understanding the strategic implications of all of these things on the operations of the authority, our board needs to understand where these different things might be implemented. And so I simply went in and color coded where I thought this was, half an hour's work, to where I thought the dominant roles would be. And of course, there can be multiple roles with each of the initiatives as to where the effort might fall. And this aligns to the statements that I made earlier, is that there will be multiple ways in which each of these initiatives are implemented across, depending upon where you sit in the organizational structure. So that's pretty much it. I mean, I'm collaborative on all this stuff. It's not, and this is not me trying to dictate anything. It's simply me starting to think about, well, if I'm going to be engaging state government in understanding the DEP or other things that the legislators might do, where do I see their predominant role being? If I'm going to be working with our county council, where do I see their possible roles being, or directly with our board? And as we well know, Jim and I have had some initial conversations with the county governmental leaders, the managers that run the 49 municipalities, some very initial conversations where at some point will the municipalities have a role to play in implementing some of these different initiatives, and so that we can get everybody spooled up. The next slide here, and again, this is just a real top level thing, is, so I listed initiative on the upper left hand corner, but it's a different initiative. It's the thing that needs to happen as a result of any one of these initiatives. There might be some policy developments. You might need some technology supporting all of this, or implementation of some new means of execution, infrastructure support, entrepreneurial seed investments that might be helpful. Obviously, public engagement, education, outreach efforts, and then the retail things and incentives that happen at the local level. And I just checked off and said, okay, this is kind of where I see these different organizations playing a role in some of these. Again, very quickly thinking about all these. And then at the very bottom of this, and that's the last I'll say, is we are working very hard and diligently now in 2022 to put together the strategic plan around all of these. But those of us in a leadership role can and should be starting to think about what would the tactical planning and implementation start to look like, so that in 2023, or even now, we can start to think about what is the execution of this downstream. And the great thing about the backup material that Ruth and the team have put together is that each one of those initiatives does start to list a time frame over which you would expect to implement one of these initiatives or more. And so what I'm hopeful is that we can put all of that information onto a diagram that gives us a sort of a multi-year perspective on where we would begin to implement some of these different ideas so that people know where we're going, because not everything can or should happen immediately in year one of this. We're sort of in year zero, but what happens in year 1, 2, 3, 4 on out? And is there a prioritization and a sequencing of the activities that works best for everyone involved? So that's where my head is. I appreciate the chance to just speak briefly on it, but I really do want to give a lot of credit to the team for their work to put that backing material behind it, because I think it's going to be really useful as we go forward.
Thanks so much, Jim. And just to let you know, I did have a conversation or an email exchange with Jim about the idea of what is the state role and how we would interact with that within the plan. We're not going to be assigning any roles to the state in the plan, but we just recognize that some things are better handled at the state level, and so we would look to that to sort of address. So for example, under product policies, we may say, that may include some extended producer responsibility. That may be something that the county advocates for at the state level. And we've seen that in many other states where it really, the locals take the action first and, maybe ban bags or something like that, and then looks for something to happen on the statewide level. So that would just be an example. So I know that I saw Mike had a comment in the chat that we're not going to be telling the state what to do in this plan. That's true, but there may be state resources, state information, state guidance for some of these things. And I think that was the intention of that color coding.
Absolutely.
Right, Jim?
You're absolutely right, Ruth. Yes.
Yeah. So it looks like we have some questions from Melissa and Joan. So Melissa, you go ahead.
Hi. Yeah. So I was looking, Jim, that was really great, but both everybody involved in that compilation, but the items associated with retail, what look like food establishments, and I don't have it up. Well, it doesn't matter. There was one other, I think I see what you're saying. There's, the municipalities and the county don't have authority, and I kind of have to pull these up again, don't have authority necessarily to do anything other than like advocating, I guess, or maybe providing a little bit of grant or seed money for refillable stations, zero packaging stores, food donation initiatives. I was just trying to wrap my head around where that role was, but I get what you're saying. And I don't think that needs to be hammered out precisely right now. The only other point I'd raise is if we're gonna, in that space, I would be interested in exploring the extent to which the municipalities and the county can influence upstream food reduction. I know there's already a big initiative, an initiative among national or multinational grocery stores to reduce food procurement upstream, so that which obviously as a result of reducing food waste downstream. And so measures that start upstream seem more seem ideal, and just within that bundle of influencing retailers on regarding food waste and refillables and all that, I'm wondering if that upstream initiative can also be encouraged, advocated for, whatever the role is of the county and the municipality.
Definitely. So we'll add that in as a discussion item. So any of these things that are refinements of what's already on the table, what I would invite you all to do, and I'm not sure to the extent that you have capacity to make comments. So is everybody familiar with how Google Drive works? You can add in a suggesting mode or in a comment mode additions to any of these initiatives. That's what I would invite you to do. So rather than editing, maybe I'll just show you for a minute What I would invite you all to do, if you have comments on these initiatives that we've prepared, and I saw that Peter had a comment about anaerobic digestion, to add a discussion of anaerobic digestion as an alternative in the organics processing initiative. So this is the organics processing initiative. We have some local and national examples for yard trimmings, food scraps, processing alternatives. And I think that what Peter's comment would be, let's also look at anaerobic digestion for organics. This would be particularly for food scraps in the county. So we could add some, we have a lot of information and research on that. And so we can add that to this initiative. And the way you would do that, to make a comment, maybe I'm inviting Peter to do this, is to add a comment here. So up here is a comment. Are you guys seeing this? Add a comment button. And then you can say, add examples of anaerobic digestion, anaerobic. All right. So I invite you to, Melissa, to the extent that you have time, we've also captured your comment today, but to the extent that you have time to add in some of those comments to these initiatives, those are the kinds of things that we're looking for you all to provide, to the extent that you have the capacity to do that.
And
So
we may need to look at the permissions, or someone commented that they can't comment, so we can adjust those.
Yeah, we'll do that. Okay, so Joan.
Briefly, yeah, the two that I really question, and just limited by the state, there may be some limit that I'm not aware of, but I do know that recycling is framed by the state in a very open way. I don't understand why the county could not be a little more specific. So while I hear that, I would want to add the county to that. The other one like that would be the one on demolition, which municipalities, in fact, have their demolition codes. And so I don't quite know how that might fit into there as well. So those were just two I had a question about. I really appreciate James' work on that.
Yeah, so, and keep in mind, this was sort of Jim's first whack at it. We'll work with him to refine that as we go along. You know, who's responsible for what is something, a little question down the line. We first want to get all the ideas on the table and do some evaluation.
Will that be in the drive, Jim's color coding?
Yeah, we can ask him to put it in there. Sure.
Cool.
Yeah, Jim. So Alex,
Yeah, I'm happy to share. Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe, Jim, we can tell you where to put it. I think that resources folder at the bottom, if you don't have permissions to add to that, you know, let me know. But I think if you could add at that, and then also make sure that happens. So Farhan.
Yeah, I think the list of initiatives looks really good. I just had one thing on the reduce reuse section where almost all of them seem to focus on reuse. And I think we could add some more initiatives for reduction, either going super specific, like, well, I know the ability of the county to do a plastic bag ban countywide is up for debate, but even just fostering local action, but making some sort of adding a few initiatives there to get either hard to recycle items out of the waste stream, or creating reuse initiatives countywide, locally, some sort of partnership. I think that would be important to include. I think also looking at the survey from earlier, where producer responsibility was one of the more popular sort of overall principles, maybe adding in producer responsibility as an initiative, because it's both a principle and a strict initiative that could go there as well. And then I also saw hard to recycle material facility under one of the categories. I can't remember which one it was, but I think also making hard to recycle material education, where it's not just having the facility, but also making sure at the county level, everyone knows what can and can't be recycled, maybe through a recycling labeling policy or a truth in recycling policy, but also making sure that people know the availability of where they can do e-waste recycling or paint recycling or other types of difficult recycling. I think those are important things to include as initiatives. Maybe on the policy side would be the best place to put them.
That's great. So we'll annotate the chart with that input, and would invite anybody to, you know, go ahead and add those in as well as additional ones. So, but we got those, right, Alex? Yeah, Okay, good. All right. Any other questions or comments on the initiatives for now? I would invite you all, to the extent that you now have permission to comment, to go ahead and make any comments or questions on those initiatives themselves, the descriptions, and then also for that chart of the 20 or so initiatives that we're reviewing, if you want to go ahead and add more strategies, as Fran has done, has suggested, we'll add those in. We would invite you to do that as well. And then just to say what our intention is for the next step, what we want to do for our upcoming workshop on the 26th is to make sure that we communicate to the public that we are working on these to produce for those 20 or 25, whatever we kind of get input from you all on additional strategies and tactics to do. We'll kind of do a two sentence or a paragraph summary of what that means. What is every other week collection, or reducing from, every twice a week collection to, once a week or every other week collection mean? And then we want to present those in kind of a matrix. And we've done this before, it can work, and kind of just have a discussion with folks. So folks that come to our workshop, we want to go through those list of 20 or 25 strategies. And first of all, say, what these are, what would be your preferences? How do you like them? Does this sound reasonable to you for the county in the 10-year time frame? Because that's the other thing. Some of these might not be appropriate for the next 2 or 3 years. There may be appropriate the next 8 or 10 years, right? But given the time frame of the 10-year plan, are these reasonable? What other things would you like to see, and what nuances you would like to see for them? So we're not going to be presenting all those lengthy versions of the initiatives to the public at the next public meeting. We're going to be talking about them in a conceptual way with a couple of sentence description of each one. That would be our plan. And then we would get feedback, come back to you all, massage that a little bit, incorporate that into our analysis. And then eventually we'll take all those strategies and tactics and put it in a matrix, short-term, medium-term, long-term, when we're going to do it, and what the diversion rate would be expected, and how fast we could do that. And then add, the cost factor, and then come up with the implementation plan and assignment of rules. Phew. Okay. So we got some work ahead of us. Melissa.
Sorry, just real fast. This is just administrative. Do we have to approve last meeting's minutes today, or that's not necessary for this kind of council?
Yeah. What do you think? So we put together the draft minutes. They were very much like, Ruth said this, Amy said this, Melissa said this. So they're not super formal. We do have on our website a category called minutes. We also have these meetings recorded so that people can see what Ruth said, Amy said, Melissa said, right? So it's up to you guys. So we will prepare these for our use. And then the only question is, do we need to formally adopt them? Do we need to make corrections? And do we need to publish them? And what do you guys think? I don't know if we can ask the county solicitor, do we have to publish minutes? Is that a requirement of this sort of body? Or do we just need to document them? Then maybe that's also a question for DEP. But
minutes are really useful when we hear not all the detail. I mean, it's great to have the records, but it would be really great, for instance, to see that the next meeting will include blah, 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 blah. The meeting at the library will include blah, 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 blah. I mean, the very general, where we came together and said, yes, I think that would be useful. I don't think we have to do it right now, but if someone could do that, that would be very useful.
So you would like on the website to say what's going to happen at each of these meetings? Is that what you just said?
I actually meant the minute said, here's what Ruth said about the meeting that would happen in the public library next time. So that I would remember what that would be.
I see.
Anything we decide should be in the clearly in the minute, but records are great.
So I think given the time, we won't formally adopt these minutes and we won't formally publish them on the website, but we'll get some information about what we should legally be required to do, if we really should be doing that for transparency. And we'll talk about that maybe at our next meeting, and then we'll publish them these minutes and the last minutes. Let's see, Jim.
Yeah, just real quick, for each of the initiatives, Is there sort of a scoring of each of them as to, all right, this one's going to have a big waste reduction impact. This is going to have a big cost reduction impact. This is going to, that we can do this one quickly because it's easy to implement for timeliness. There's a number, this one has a big impact on environmental justice. This one has a, sort of an alignment between, I look at these as matrices. So, it's down the left-hand side, it's every initiative, and across the top, it's all the big strategic or guiding principles, including, basic stuff like schedule, cost, and risk, and other kinds of things that you have to include in any plan. Is there a scoring that goes with them so that people can immediately see, oh, initiative X has a lot of benefit in these particular areas, that's something that we should really be looking at hard, versus initiative Y, which, the timeline for that's really long. It may have a minor or modest impact on the total picture. We can afford to implement that a little further downstream. I'm just wondering whether you all do that kind of analysis at all. It's something I've done many times.
Yeah, so I think you're really talking to the idea of evaluation criteria, and except for kind of diversion and cost. So let's say the metrics. So let me share my screen one more time, and sorry to be kind of going back and forth about that. So if you look at the metrics, this is what we would intend to do for each of these initiatives: the estimated diversion potential, greenhouse gas, public health impact reduction potential, planning level costs, and then implementation, both planning and development and implementation. So that's what we're intending to do. The additional criteria that you're discussing, we did not have on our plan to do. If that would be helpful to do, we can do. But I think that what happens really is in zero waste planning, it's not an either or, it's really a matter of when, because we really want to do everything. I mean, there isn't really anything that we would never want to do. It's just a matter of how soon. And so I think by cost and diversion strategies, impact to public health, that will probably give us enough guidance to sequence them. So, but let's keep that on the front burner. Do we need to add evaluation criteria? We're not going to do it for this next round. We're still in the information gathering stage. If we're going to do a synthesizing and narrowing down and strategizing of what goes when, we might want to add more evaluation criteria. Those might be derived from the guiding principles. So that's a way to use the guiding principles as evaluation criteria.
As they should be, yes.
Let's hear from Bonnie.
I just have one question. Jim Warner had given information when we were looking at the statistics of around the tipping costs and the cost of collection. And I missed the cost of collection numbers. And if he could just put that in the chat, that would be helpful to me. And the other thing I just wanted to say is that this was pretty amazing. There was so much here today. It's almost a little overwhelming, I think. There was so much information here and so much useful information that I'm a little bit wondering what the next steps really are, and if there's some more succinct way to just say, these are our next step. This is what we're going to do next. That would be helpful to me. So, but thank you, everybody. This was just a lot of stuff to take in and all great information. Thank you.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. We may be going a little bit too strong, too fast. And if we want to slow down, of course we can. So the next step is that we are all invited to participate, and we would like full advisory committee and subcommittee participation in our next workshop, where we're going to be going through the strategies and tactics that we elevated today. We will add in the ones that we discussed. We do have an in-person meeting at the Norwood Public Library. Subject to, COVID catastrophe, we may cancel that. But our current plan is that under current guidelines, we'll be meeting at the Norwood Public Library. They have capacity for 40 people. So we would like to get 40 people there. If you have friends, if you have neighbors that you live in the vicinity of Norwood, really want to encourage those folks to get there. And we would like to have at least 2 advisory committee members there. So if you would want to sign up in the chat or let us know or register, then we can know that you are coming to that meeting. And we may not need to limit it to 2. We just don't want to give away all the seats. And then for everyone that is not attending in person, we would really like you to participate in the online meeting so that we can discuss amongst ourselves and hear from everybody. So we'll be able to have a longer discussion amongst ourselves, and then we will also be able to get as many folks that we can include out there, in the county to get involved as well. So that's really our next immediate steps.
Ruth,
And
can I
then-
just ask a quick question about that? Are we asking people to sign up if they're coming in person?
Yes.
Okay, so just, I think as you help us get the word out, there is a sign up link, and ask people to sign up, because one of my concerns is if COVID numbers go up and we need to cancel, we want to have a way to reach people.
So on the website for this committee, we do have a sign in opportunity. And so that's what we'll include in our outreach mechanisms. And when we send out that outreach mechanism through the public informations folks next week, it would be great if you could send that along to your networks, put that on your Facebook, Instagram, and invite your neighbors to participate. Okay, so that's really all that we had for today. Anybody have any capping comments or questions before we sign off? Awesome. Well, we'll look forward to seeing you on the 26th, and then at our June meeting, where we'll kind of be decompressing a little bit and coming up with a strategy of pulling this all together. All right. Thanks, you guys.
Thanks, everyone.